This is part 4 of my Outlander Blood of My Blood Season 1 Episode 3 review. As always, if you are looking to avoid spoilers from the books or the TV shows, please do keep on scrolling. So following the conversation that Ellen has with Ned Gowan about her brothers being idiotic and unwilling to yield to the other one, Ellen enters into another one of her memories, and the show is using her memories as a vehicle to provide us with flashback scenes that give us a little bit more context about her and her brothers and her father. And this particular flashback scene memory that she has is a callback to the title of this episode, which is School of the Moon. And this memory begins with Ellen questioning her father about leaving Colum and Dougal to their own devices to go out on this cattle raid without him. He tells Ellen they've been, waiting their whole life to take part in the Cateran, and that means a band of men fighting. And this cattle raid is kind of a benchmark, a test of sorts for Colum. And Ellen calls it the School of the Moon. And that's, like I said, the title of the episode. It's also the title of a book by a man named Stuart McCarty. There's a whole lot of history behind this practice. And Ellen, says, why don't I go with them? Why don't I be another pupil in this school of the moon? And Jacob tells her no, because obviously she's a woman. Why would she go with them on this cattle raid that could be very dangerous? Colum, as we learn, is tasked with leading these men, these warriors, into taking the cattle from one of their rival clans, neighboring clans, and doing it with no repercussions. And Ellen knows that Colum is particularly excited to display his courage to his father. Because keep in mind, Colum is the oldest son, so he's been really waiting his whole life to get his father's approval and, be told that he's on the right path to one day becoming the laird. And Jacob explains to Ellen that just going out on the raid implies that you're a brave person, but coming home with a safe return, that's a skill. And he also has this really great line saying that darkness sheds light on who we really are. And I think that, again, there's a lot of foreshadowing with just that one piece of dialogue, because when Colum returns, he has failed. He has fallen off his horse. He is injured after being thrown from his horse, and Jacob is furious. And Ellen is placed in this scene so that, we understand that she witnessed this firsthand and that this memory flashback scene is hers because she was present. When we see Colum getting dragged into Leoch, obviously Dougal is with him, but this man here to the left is Alec. Alec is an important character, I think, personally, because in Outlander, the novels, he actually is the person that tells Claire a lot of these stories. So Claire learning about a lot of the things that happened between Ellen and her brothers and how they came to be in power, that's all being told to her in Outlander by Jamie or Alec, who works in the stables. Colum and Dougal end up telling Jacob, their father, that they had to abandon the raid, and Jacob reprimands them both for failing at their task. And I felt so bad for Colum in the scene, but the acting was phenomenal because it's uncomfortable to watch. And Jacob says, why is it that every time I send the two of you to do anything together, you fail so catastrophically? At one point, I think Ned is obviously uncomfortable, but at the heart of it, he knows that Colum needs help because his leg is broken, and his father is not doing anything about that. He's just relentlessly scolding him. And so Ned announces to the room that he's going to go find Davy Beaton, who is the healer that Claire takes over at Castle Leoch when she arrives in 1743. Unfortunately for us, though, they do not ever show his face in this episode, but I feel like if they're going to mention him, hopefully at some point in the season, we will finally get a reveal of who he is. This moment right here, there was an interview that came out with Seamus, who plays Colum, talking about how great it was to act opposite the actor who plays his father, and how intense this particular moment was when he grabbed his face and told him to cry. And it was just handled so phenomenally by both of them, because even if you watch the scene over and you only focus on Dougal's face, you can just see how much this man affects his sons. And so he tells Dougal to bring his brother up to his bed and leave him. And Ellen has been watching all of this, and she's just shocked by the entire thing. Because what I think is smart with these flashbacks is that in the first 2 episodes, the picture that's painted of Jacob is very biased because Ellen is in mourning, and so she's only remembering the good things about her father. And as we're moving further and further away from that immediate shock of his death, I think it's a fascinating story vehicle that her memories of him become more realistic, and the truth of who he was as a dad and as a father becomes a lot more obvious to us. It's less biased. There's not that rose-colored glasses that she had put around him in those first 2 episodes. We're getting the true version of him and kind of the horrible things he did. We can see Ellen gifting him birds to watch, because when they would go out on their walks with one another, she knew that Colum liked to observe the birds, and Colum calls them resilient creatures, always with a song to sing. And I think it's a nice way to remind us of the fact that Colum gifted his father a bird and his dad paid absolutely no attention to it. And when his father enters the room, you can feel that like positive, loving energy between them just gets sucked right out. And Colum becomes this fragile little boy in his presence, and you can tell that his whole demeanor changes. Jacob is mad that Colum is still in bed. He says it was just a scratch. Why are you still in bed? And Colum defends himself by saying that Davy Beaton told him he'd be well by Hogmanay, which is New Year's Eve in the pagan holidays. Colum also tries to defend himself by finally telling his father that Dougal led the men astray and caused this entire issue by wanting to capture a bounty from the MacDonald clan. And he did it without warning. And so the MacDonalds knew that they were all coming, rang the bell, and ran after them all. And when they chased them down into the valley, Colum fell off his horse because some of the MacDonalds fired a flintlock musket, essentially, which is what a fusil is. And when his horse got spooked, he fell off. And his dad asks him, well, I hope you stood up and fought like a man. But at that point, his leg was broken, so he couldn't fight. And importantly, Ellen immediately defends Colum and says, this is Dougal's fault. But to Jacob, that doesn't matter, because Colum should have been able to have control of the men, and they should have not listened to Dougal at all. The command should have fallen under Colum. And you can understand that argument, but at the same time, it breaks your heart because Dougal's such an idiot. And the killer is when he says that Colum is nothing but a cripple and just leaves him in his room. We can see Ellen try and prevent him from getting out of bed to go after his father because he's so desperate to prove to him that he is not a cripple. And it's just horrible watching him approach these stairs. In the books, in the novels, the Outlander novels, we know that he had gotten out of bed and fallen, and that was the second fall he had. So they did depict that pretty true to the recollections that Claire hears secondhand. And when he's at the bottom of the stairs here and Jacob just continues to walk away from him and ignore him, it really paints a true picture of just how awful he was to his sons, because this is the moment when Colum is injured beyond repair. He never recovers from these breaks in his legs because of his disability that he has. And I think it's important to show this as Ellen's memory, because when she, recalls how Colum was treated by their dad, it makes her next actions much more valid. You can tell in this shot here how hard it makes her face thinking about the terrible way her father treated Colum, followed up by this scene where we see Colum being undermined by everyone around him because he's not physically able to compete. And that's when Ellen realizes that she has to be the bigger person here, because Colum is the right person to support even though he's done wrong by her. I think this episode really makes all of us have a lot more sympathy for Colum, both as a young man in this show, but also as an older man in the Outlander show. And Ellen can admit that she was wounded by Colum's actions, but she can now see this bigger picture of why Colum needs the support of the Grants. So she encourages him to move another piece on the chessboard and invite Malcolm Grant to the oath-taking. Come back for part 5.